Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes here.
Hi.
Hello.
I wonder if I know, looking good.
Represent.
Let's see who else.
If they use the panelist link, they should be able to get in. Is that right?
Yeah, just an attendee, Julia. Hi, Gina. Thanks for joining. And Trisha.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Oh, you're a little echoey. You're in the same room. Hi, Laura. Thanks.
Good morning. Hi.
Thanks for joining. Well, we'll get started in just a minute here. We have quite a few folks joining today, so we'll give everyone a minute to get us started. We have today's panel set up as a webinar, so only panelists will be seen and heard. We're asking everyone else to be using the chat for questions. You can definitely feel free to introduce yourself, but we will use the chat for questions and for some sharing as well. Awesome to see so many folks today. Holly, no worries on the camera. We're in webinar mode, So only the panelists will have cameras on today. So the attendees, you won't be seen or heard, but please feel free to use that chat to ask us any questions. We have some folks here. You can chat directly to help answer any technical questions too. So feel free to reach out to myself or Monique or Elena or Emily, and we can take care of that for you. But I will go ahead and get us started. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm Mary Zanotti, Executive Director of Colorado Youth for a Change. Lots of you have joined us before for a Colorado Reengagement Network panel, so welcome back. But it's super exciting to see so many new folks join us today for such an important topic as well. We formed the Reengagement Network in 2014 as a way to create space to share best practice in student engagement and re-engagement among Colorado schools. Many of you know that at CYC, we partner with schools and districts to provide re-engagement services and also dropout prevention and intervention programming. Through the years, we've partnered with over 40 school districts, and we've been in the unique position of seeing firsthand all the amazing things that are happening in your schools across those districts. And so it felt really important to create a space for people to share what's working and brainstorm about challenges they're facing with each other. Over the years, we've discussed grading policies, coding changes, attendance challenges, and other topics that have led to changes that have positively impacted our students. Today, we're going to hear from folks that are making a difference for student mental health. So as most of you know, instances of depression and anxiety among children and youth were already on the rise in 2019, and then came the pandemic. So many of our students have experienced isolation, disruptions in their learning and socialization, and grief and loss. Nationally, experts in public health are calling it a crisis that's being potentially overlooked because of everything else going on with the pandemic. In preparing for today, we reached out to our staff and AmeriCorps members serving in schools across many areas of the state, close to 200 schools, to get a sense of what's going on in their schools around mental health. I also spoke in depth to my two children to see what's happening at their schools and what conversations their schools are having. I was kind of surprised to learn that there's not when I sort of reflected on this moment in our time and thinking about, people are still in survival mode. They're trying to teach students whose learning may be all over, trying to manage their own instances of isolation, grief, and loss, and trying to function in a system that needs to be rebuilt. So I was encouraged to learn about the schools that have managed to work mental health support into their schools and systems, and excited to learn about the statewide program I Matter. I immediately went home and helped my 16-year-old access these services, and it's the first time he's really clicked with a mental health professional. So I'm excited to learn from our panelists today and to hear what you all that have joined us might be doing in your schools and organizations as well. So here to introduce our panelists and manage the flow of today's conversation is Monique Gallegos. Monique is our Manager of Re-Engagement Services at Colorado Youth for a Change. Monique and I will be fielding your questions, taking them to the panel at the end. So feel free to chat those. Also, feel free to use the chat to share what's happening at your school or your organization. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll take it over to Monique.
Thank you, Mary. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Colorado Re-Engagement Network webinar, Initiatives to Support Student Mental Health. We have 5 panelists joining us today who will be sharing more about what their organizations are doing to support mental health, how and why they got started, and how others may replicate some of their best practices, and also bringing awareness to resources. We are joined by Gina, a wellness coordinator, and Trisha, social worker from Rocky Mountain High School in Fort Collins. Melissa, the founder and executive director, and Keith, the director of recovery from 5280 High School in Denver, and Laura, marketing and outreach manager for the I Matter Colorado program at the Office of Behavioral Health. A quick reminder, if you have any questions while the panelists are sharing, please use the chat box and we'll get to your questions during our Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. But I'd like to turn it over to our panelists. Thank you for being here. We will start with Gina and Trisha, if you want to share a little bit more about your organization and what you're doing to support mental health.
Does that seem weird? Like I hop from one screen to the other screen? So me and Gina are here from Rocky Mountain High School in Fort Collins. And we don't have like a PowerPoint or anything. What we really thought would be most beneficial is to see our school-based wellness room. And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about the why of why this became what it became. So it all started, I'd say, about 8 years ago. Rocky is a couple thousand student public high school in Fort Collins. So it's a pretty big school. And I think me, another mental health worker, along with the dean of students and a few teachers, started meeting because we were starting to really recognize that we were not meeting the needs of a lot of kids, especially kids struggling with anxiety, kids who would just not go to class or would sit in the bathrooms crying or be walking the halls. And so that's kind of how it all began, was just a conversation of we're not meeting the needs of a lot of these students. And so in time, what we did was we designed a school-based wellness room. And so this has been, I think it's 8 years where we've had it. And so that was kind of the reason for us deciding to build a wellness room. And so, you know, I think working in a big public high school, number one thing is staffing it and room. Like we are busting at the seams at Rocky Mountain High School. And so about 8 years ago, there was an area that had opened up and we grabbed it. And that's kind of how it started. We started like filling it with all research-based interventions with literally zero money. It was more of asking for donations, or we'd get $100 and we'd go and look on Craigslist for, like, we got a punching bag. We had a lot of teachers bring in lamps, rocking chairs, puzzles. So it kind of all began with just gifting and the kids painting the room. We had one of the art teachers paint the mural behind us, if you can see. So a lot of it was just us believing in something and beginning. And I think the number one thing I think is that you have to believe in it. And truly the understanding of, you know, anxiety with youth and trauma with youth. And so our purpose is kids can leave their classes with a pass for the wellness room. The goal is they are able to come in and we teach them how to self-regulate, whatever that looks like. They can choose to talk to someone, they can choose to work on a puzzle, use the rocking chairs, all the different interventions we have, with the goal of regulating going back to class so they can focus and learn. So maybe we could kind of just take you through what it looks like when you walk through the door. Yeah.
Should we do, let's walk through the door.
Okay.
All right, I think this is gonna work. So this is our entrance. So what students will see when they walk in. We have a desk where we will have staff, like Trish was saying earlier. We are fully staffed here in the Wellness Center, which is fantastic. I know a lot of different sites do have wellness centers, but they are not fully staffed, or they are maybe, you know, the drug and alcohol counselor's office, and so it's not always open. So we are very grateful that we have such a supportive school. So when they walk in here on the left, we've got a little plant area where students can water and nurture plants as they grow. That's a new one this year, which is super exciting. We've got some aromatherapy set up. along with throughout the room, we have a lot of psychoeducational material that will kind of explain what the intervention is doing for the student to help them self-regulate. Things like tea and even that.
Snacks, water.
Yep. Snacks, water. So students will come in and check in on the iPad, hand their pass over, and staff will check in and say, hey, you know, what do you need today? Do you need to talk to someone? Do you need quiet space? And regardless of their answer, we're always giving them time to kind of settle in and still checking in to see if they do want to talk. And if not, then they just hang out. Let's move it over here. We have space for students to take tests, work on homework if they need some quiet space, puzzles, kinetic sand. All right, and then let's actually finish in the big room. We have this giant, lots of coloring, collaborative stuff. Sorry, I hope you guys are able to see this. So I'm not
Yes.
making you nauseous.
We have wonderful egg chairs. This is where you can find me most days when there's not a crisis.
We have some musical instruments,
Music.
and we have one of the counselors is here on a grant, and she very graciously bought us a whole bunch of new furniture this year, so that's very exciting. But just a bunch of different spaces and interventions like a movement standing desk, weighted blankets. And then we have, of course, the punching bag, which is extremely popular. Place to sit, speak with students, different types of seating apparatuses.
This is our natural light.
Oh, this one's really bright.
Oh, anyway, you can turn it on and it's like the natural light, like sunlight.
Mhm. Yep. And then we have one more room. We call it the quiet room. And again, it's just another space for students to have maybe more private conversations with staff. If they just, you know, students with migraines are a big piece there. Yes. Oh, and then of course our coloring station, which is very popular. And students tend to spend about probably averaging 15 minutes, sometimes 20. So it's not, like Trish was saying, we got a lot of buy-in from staff at the very beginning. And I think anyone starting any school looking to start a wellness center, staff is going to be on board.
Yeah.
And I think a big piece of that is we really work hard coordinating with teachers and students to make sure that we are keeping that integrity of the space and that trust with teachers, like students are spending time here, going back to class. There's definitely a lot of upkeep and conversations with students in terms of how they're using it and not abusing the space. So yeah, anything you would add to that?
I think, you know, we talked, the one thing, me and Gina, we weren't as brilliant as we were this year, but one of the things, Gina is the wellness coordinator, so kind of runs the room. And we always struggled having consistent staff. For the first few years, it was piecemealing. And as we know, best practice is you need consistency along with that supportive, loving, yet giving limits to students. And so one of the things we do is we work with CSU and we get interns. So right now we are staffing our wellness room with 3 MSW interns who are learning, and yet they're all very skilled where they know how to interact. They know how to help kids regulate. They can check in, they understand if we need more support, like whether this needs to be a full-on suicide assessment. And so, you know, we just this year figured out we have amazing interns that we work with in the district. And this is really a perfect setting for them to learn. And so right now, it's Gina and 3 amazing interns who are doing their master's internship in the wellness room. And so we're learning, we're always open to feedback. Maybe we should ask questions. I see the SPED, I work SPED, and there are kids where this is not an appropriate intervention, right? They're too escalated. Again, so we have to have different interventions for those students, but overall, it is open to any student who could benefit. Gina's amazing at really getting to know the kids and know when they need it. We have contracts that maybe you want to talk on.
Melissa, how do you keep kids from hanging out?
Mhm.
So a big piece of that is, as Trish said, any student can use the Wellness Center. However, we hit ninth grade, our ninth graders pretty hard in all of our Lobo 101 classes, which all freshmen take. I'll come in, we'll do a tour, kind of like a quick training. And hey, if this is a space you see yourself using on a more regular basis, talk to your counselor. We go through a contract, we learn like who their support people in the building are, who they trust, kind of what they might be using the space for. And what we found is that really helps. I mean, it gives us good information on the student and how we can best serve them and support them, but also it makes it very like official.
Yeah.
Right. And so we do like a training, how to use it. Hey, we don't use phones in here. Why do you think that is? And, no more than 20 minutes, because really if you are still unable to, what we'll say to students, if you're still unable to go to class at kind of that 20-minute mark, this space is not doing it for you, we're going to look at next steps. Do we need to talk to a counselor?
Yep.
Do we need to call home? And hey, maybe sometimes the answer is you just can't be at school today. And that typically keeps students kind of moving along. Yeah. If that answers that question.
They enjoy it. Like, I think the kids who really enjoy it and like it are going to use it appropriately, I think. And I think them knowing this is not a hangout place with friends. So don't text your friends to meet you here, because we're not gonna, then you're not welcome.
And we get that every so often, that students are going through a thing and my friend is the only one that knows the details and whatever, I don't want to share again. Cool, you can talk about that outside of this space. The media center is open. Here we have trained staff who can help you verbally process some of that stuff. And I've never had a student like get frustrated with that. They're like, oh, actually, and it ends up kind of opening up a relationship for them, between them and the Wellness Center moving forward. So, yeah.
What questions? A lot of, in our district, at least, a lot of the middle schools, a lot of schools are trying to do a wellness room. And I think, biggest thing, we are lucky that we have space. We have an amazing space. The problem I hear at a lot of other schools is we don't have space and we can't staff it. I know one of my colleagues at another high school, her office is the wellness room. So if she has to meet with a kid, you have to shut it down, which again, I understand that's going to happen, but we are just very blessed that we can staff it and it's consistent. And so using interns is a great thing, asking for donations, grants. Now we're at that point of writing grants and getting grant money and buying things like, we go through lots of markers and art stuff. Puzzles are big, snacks.
Yeah, so having a budget is
nice.
It helps, yes. But luckily we're getting to a point, I think, in a lot of districts where this is becoming necessary.
It is. It's necessary. It's necessary. And I even think we actually yesterday we did a tour, and we had a teacher who used to teach here. Her daughter goes here now. But she was saying too, like, the power of letting the kids, it's hard for teachers to let kids leave, I think, but yet knowing when they come back, you can tell they're in such a better place and they can learn. They're not just sitting in class feeling anxious and not being able to retain anything, because we know if they're not regulated, they can't learn. But even teachers are seeing wow, this is so good. Like they're sending kids to the wellness room for 10 minutes and the kids are coming back overall in a much better place.
Definitely. Thank you, Gina and Trisha. I loved the tour. That was a really nice touch. And
It's literally like you walk in a high school and it's very institutional like, right? Like old high schools, and you walk in this room and it's like you're on an island somewhere. Like
A little oasis.
you can probably tell it's very calm and the lighting and it smells really good. And
yes, I know I would use that if I attended.
yeah,
Yes, and thank you, Elena. Yes, we've also relied on CYC members in the
Yes.
past to help support students in this space.
hi Elena.
So thank you for sharing that. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and if there are any additional questions, we can get to those if they weren't able to answer those questions for you towards the end. But thank you. I think building trust within the school and building that space is so wonderful. And it was really nice to see it in action in real time, virtually, of course, but it was very nice. We would also like to hear and move on to Melissa and Keith to share a little bit more about the importance of sense of community at your school. If you could share a little bit more about 5280.
Thanks, Monique. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa, the school leader at 5280 High School, and Keith Hayes is our director of recovery. Wow, that was awesome. That was really cool to see that wellness center. That was very, very cool. We actually serve one of y'all students who moved down to Denver to go to our school. So it was cool to actually meet somebody from that school. Well, what we do is we're going to go from like the very large traditional school with an awesome resource down to very narrow. We serve a very narrow student population. We help high school students who need help with addiction. And so kids who are struggling with substance use and substance abuse. That's our specialty. That's what we do. We also do project-based learning as our pedagogy because we feel like it really aligns with recovery. And I think the heart, I'll have Keith talk more about our recovery program because that's his bread and butter every day. But I think I'll talk about how we started. Maybe was that one of the questions, Monique?
Yes.
I was in another career. I'd been an educator for about 7-8 years, and then I left to start my real job, is what I was thinking at the time, and met a high school kid from a local high school here in Denver who had dropped out because he was trying to get clean off of heroin. And he couldn't go to his school because that's where he would get his heroin, and everybody there did drugs. It was a drug culture. And so it just broke my heart. As a former educator, I was like, wait a minute, this kid wants to not be around heroin and he has to drop out of school in order for that to happen. And it just bugged me. I was like, we can do better than this. And a year went by and I kept having the idea and I couldn't shake it. And so finally I relented and said, okay, well, maybe I'll start the school. And that was back in 2013. And so now that's how 5280 got started. We're a public school in Denver Public Schools. We serve about 125 students, all sober from drugs and alcohol. It's kind of like a whole family program. We interact with the parents. We have supports in the community that we partner with. We don't do it all here at the school, but we help the kids by like forming a fabric of safety net that they can't fall through. And I think I'll turn it over to Keith to talk more about our recovery program.
Hello, everybody. My name is Keith Hayes. I'm the Director of Recovery here at 5280 High School. And you heard Melissa say earlier, we serve students who struggle with substance abuse, self-harm, eating disorders, et cetera, and just destructive behaviors overall. And what our school really provides is intentional community. You know, we have a community of students and staff who are all trudging in the same direction. And our message is to carry the message, you know, to the student who is still suffering with substance abuse and being able to meet our kids wherever they're at. A lot of our kids come to us from treatment, or they come to us from other high schools around town, and they're looking to find some other kids who have been in that same hole that they've been in, that have been hopeless, that have been depressed, that have struggled with their mental health. right? And they come here and they get a chance to meet kids who have been in that hole and they have found a solution to their substance abuse, or they have found some solutions to help them better with their mental health. And they look like each other, they sound like each other, they've been through the same experiences, and they find community, right? And kids who struggle with mental health and with substance abuse, they need love, right? These kids need love. And we give them a lot of love here and a lot of attention and a lot of grace and a lot of understanding to their struggles, and being able to be around other adults who have also struggled with substances also gives them some hope as well. So we have our BOAT program, which means being open and authentic together. That's kind of how we start our day before every day. And we talk about the principles of recovery, and we talk about how we can apply those principles in the classroom. How do we apply them at home with our parents? How do we apply them in our everyday lives? And principles like honesty and hope and faith and courage and integrity and willingness and love and forgiveness and being of service to others. And we talk about that, and we have open and honest conversations about everything. We talk about sex, we talk about substances, we talk about the things that we're struggling with, right? And we just have an open forum of kids who get to a place to be vulnerable with one another and talk about what they're struggling with and what's going on. And really the magic is with the kids themselves. Kids come in through here, they tour, they have this idea of, I don't want to be sober. I don't care how much my life has become unmanageable as a result of substances. They meet other kids here who've got a year sober, 2 years sober, 3 years sober. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know there was other sober kids out there, right? And they get a chance to get involved in our community, and they start to find their way. And we've had parents move from Texas, and I have kids who travel as far as Erie and Boulder and all across the state to be able to bring their kids to a safe environment. And the truth is that our kids are out here dying. They are dying. Fentanyl is one of the number one killers right now, and it's real. It's a real thing. And a lot of people want to bury their heads in the sand around what's going on with our kids. But, when I was in school, if you were one of the drug kids or the drug culture, it was very taboo, right? You were not considered the cool kids, right? But now drug culture is so prevalent. The kids that are doing drugs are the cool kids now. And it's so different today. And at our school, it's all about attraction, right? So here, the cool kids are the sober kids, and we make sobriety look cool. And it's cool to be sober. It's cool to talk about recovery. It's cool to talk about spiritual principles. And that's just how our school is. And that's what it is. That's the environment and the culture that we've developed. And everybody shows up here for one another. And we just meet each other wherever we're at on a daily basis. And we love on each other. And you'd be surprised how much you get energy out of a student, and a student willing to change their life by just getting some love. Because not every kid is getting love at home. Not every kid has the same circumstances. So they come in through our doors. We love on them so they can love themselves again. We help them deal with their guilt. We help them deal with their shame. We help them deal with their trauma. We find out what their root problems is and what's going on in their lives. And we allow them to take the past and we leave it in the past, and we start to put together one day at a time, clean and sober. So it's very awesome. I did see a question. Yeah, everybody's together. So I got 9th through 12th all together. Everybody's in different stages of their recovery. I've got some 9th graders right now who got over a year sober already, right? And who are already rolling, and they're already leaders as 9th graders, right? So everybody's together. We're all in the same boat. We're all rowing in the same direction. It's usually about 90 to 95 kids every day in our recovery program, how we get our day started. And very grateful and blessed to be able to show up for these kids and meet them wherever they're at and help them deal with their substance abuse.
Absolutely. Thank you, Keith and Melissa. I think it's really important how you all are providing that space for vulnerability where they can talk about any struggles or challenges, and creating that sense of community is really important for mental health. So I appreciate both of you being here and sharing more about your school. And now we have Laura, who is a part of the I Matter Colorado program. We'd like to hear a little bit more about what that program is, how it came about, and any resources that you could share with us.
Sure.
Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. So I'm Laura Gabay. I'm a marketing and outreach manager with the Colorado Office of Behavioral Health. And I always like to start by saying right now we're part of the Colorado Department of Human Services, but we're really excited that Governor Polis has recently appointed Dr. Morgan Medlock as the first ever Behavioral Health Administration Commissioner. And Dr. Medlock, who's a psychiatrist, will sit on the governor's cabinet. So this is really neat stuff, I think, says a lot about Colorado. So I'm going to quickly pick up some slides, if that's okay. I think I can share my screen. And I'm just going to do that and see if that works. 1 second. All right. And I'm just going to make it in a slide format so you guys can see it. 1 second. Can you see the slides? I think I'm doing the right thing here. 1 second.
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, good. All right. So rather than take time to get it up in the, so you can just see the actual presentation, I'm going to show them to you the way they are, but you can see them, I think. So the first slide is our iMatter. This is what the portal looks like. So iMatter Colorado is where one actually not only goes to register, and you can fill out a survey. And obviously it's also, I saw the wonderful posters up at Rocky Mountain High School and in the amazing wellness room. So this just reminds me how we're part of a continuum. And I think this is really important that all of us, there are different pieces to mental health. And a lot of it is really important around self-care. So that brings me to a little bit of the history of iMatter. So iMatter is thanks to House Bill 21-1258, which was signed into law by the governor last July. And iMatter it was originally titled the Rapid Mental Health Response for Youth in our state. And it probably goes without saying that a little bit of what drove this was the pandemic and sort of the news that came across that kids were really having a hard time. And a lot of what would be somewhat ordinary mental health symptoms were exacerbated by isolation, anxiety, fear about the pandemic. And I know this goes for the grown-ups too, but I think that created the momentum to create this program. So it is statewide right now, thanks to the program's budget consideration. We are able to offer 6 free sessions. So if you didn't know that, one of my favorite things to share. After we get done, I did put already in the chat the website that sits on the Colorado Department of Human Services website, where you can order print materials for free, shipped to free of charge, just like you saw up at Rocky Mountain High School, and also a digital toolkit. So the program offers 6 sessions. It is open to every single Colorado youth who is 18 and younger. It is also open to people who are 21 and younger who are receiving special education services. And it's thought to be the first of its kind in the country only because really it's statewide. So not to take away from some of the other local programs, even in our state, in Gunnison and in Chaffey County, in Buena Vista, this is just really the first of its kind to be statewide. This is the very first screen a person sees when they go to imattercolorado.org. You also can visit yoimportocolorado.org for a fully Spanish version of the website. We do offer counseling in Spanish and in English, and are working to improve our capabilities in other languages. And I can answer some questions about that as we move along. Now, the best thing I love to tell about iMatter is that it actually was informed and still is with youth stakeholders. So they helped us pick the creative, as you might be able to tell. It's vibrant, it's inviting, it was inclusive. And they also picked the name iMatter because a lot of us are told that it's selfish to think about yourself all the time. But you know what? Self-care is probably one of the most important things you can do for yourself. So as I mentioned earlier, iMatter is both a portal that you can use, a web-based application to receive telehealth. We also have some in-person sessions so people can sign up for. We have 128 therapists across the state right now. Some of them are in our partner with Signal Behavioral Health, was a vendor originally on this project, but some of them are independent practitioners or with community-based organizations, like here in Denver, Servicios de la Raza, Jewish Family Service of Colorado. So they're really terrific. They're all licensed and they have different expertise and specialty areas, including LGBTQ plus issues. That's a mouthful, right? So one of the things I like to say is we are seeing a lot of kiddos present, and this is probably not surprising, with some acute symptoms, and some of them are in crisis. While the iMatter appointments are readily available, it really wasn't intended to replace Colorado Crisis Services. So one of the first screens that we offer is to contact Colorado Crisis Services, because iMatter was originally intended to help a youth experience what you would call ordinary talk therapy, cognitive therapy, all of it trauma informed, but it's not necessarily immediate. So I always mention that at the outset. There's a short survey that either the parent or the youth can fill out as they go through it. And it asks us some very basic questions. And here's what I think is really interesting. Anybody can take the pediatric symptom checklist. So if you're a parent or a youth, you can take that checklist. It's used to help pair the youth with the appropriate therapist. And yet I think it's a really helpful tool because it can also help you identify, what are some of the feelings, that I'm feeling, what might be, the best way for me to get support for those feelings. The next thing that we have is a social determinants of health survey. And all of you are probably very much in the know, but this is essential because a lot of times your mental health symptoms might be exacerbated by your safety net needs or feelings of concern about your family's medical care, or there might be something going on at home. We do have a team of care navigators behind iMatter. I'll put that email in the chat after I get ready to go. It's also on the website. But they're there to try to help support the youth if there's needs identified that we can help with resources for. We talk about, 211 is a wonderful resource support in our state. They don't provide counseling, but 211 now has 5 behavioral health navigators on its team. So they're able to really try to help troubleshoot maybe insurance questions and so forth, which brings me to a really nice question. iMatter is completely free, so we never require any insurance information. That makes it really great for a teenager. Many of them are able to access mental health care without their parents' consent because of the statute in our state. So it becomes completely confidential. There's never an insurance bill or a Medicaid question or so forth. They really can use all 6 sessions completely for free. So if you get a score, and then you have some basic registration information. Here's where you can put down your language preference or whether you would like the in-person session or an online session. And before you know it, you're connected and paired with a therapist. Now, if this weren't the therapist who you really felt would be best for you, you could write that email, which is support@imattercolorado.org. And the care navigation team could help you get to another therapist. There are many of them. And the other pretty neat thing is it's a 45-minute session. They are offered 7 days a week from 7 in the morning until 8 at night. And because it's telehealth, it can be accessed really anywhere on the phone, on the computer. If in person is best, there are in-person sessions. And we have hundreds of appointments available every couple of weeks right now because we've just had so much therapist interest. So I think the hardest thing, again, I'm probably telling you something you already know, is asking kids to trust us, asking them that this is a program of the Colorado Office of Behavioral Health. So this is a really quality confidential program. So another element, as you saw from the posters, is that this is also a public awareness campaign. So at the very end, I'll do my call to action because I was asked to share and answer not only how iMatter started, but how can you help us share awareness? And really our number one goal is to boost utilization. So the posters help. We have posters, rack cards, stickers, a banner for your school if you would like, lawn signs. And nearly all of the materials are in Spanish and in English. So I invite you to go to that very first website I showed you, or the imatter.org website, and order some things for your school, your space, especially since now we're starting to return to a lot of in-person activities. Some data. We've served almost 1,200 youth so far. So we started on October 27th, and 1,200 youth have received at least one session. The interesting data to me that's not on the slide is of those, 691 have taken 2 sessions, 398 have taken 3, and 106 have taken 4 more sessions. So what we're seeing is, and I think that's really pretty amazing, because at the same time, kids are trying it for the first time and they're staying with it. And at the very end, and I'll answer this question for you all later, but we do have that care navigation team to try to work with the therapist. Maybe the kiddo can continue with the therapist if they have insurance. If they don't, we have the community mental health centers. We're trying very hard that if the kiddo needs to stay in this therapy, that there's no, moment where they're, told no. We're trying to really work very hard with the family. It's actually 126 licensed therapists. And then the very last slide is my contact information, so you'll have it. And right now, because it was built with a law that was passed last year, funding expires on June 30th. The good news is that we hear the lawmakers are taking it back up. So while I have no say-so in it, and you certainly are all citizens, so you can voice your support for such a thing, we think we have the momentum and the support. The governor featured iMatter in his State of the State. There was a young man there who was 14 years old who talked about his experience with iMatter. And the last thing I wanted to ask is a call to action. Besides ordering some materials, we have that digital toolkit, but we're also looking for youth influencers. So after this, I will share with Emily, I think it was who set this up, or Monique. And I've got 2 pieces to send along. One is a fact sheet on our youth influencer initiative. Kiddos can get between, I think it's $25 and $75 in a Visa gift card in partnership with our advertising agency if they want to participate in the social media campaign and create what they call organic content. Because apparently, and I don't know why this is, the kids would rather listen to other kids. And because I'm a mom to a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old, and I think I'm fascinating, but apparently they don't think I'm very fascinating. So if you know of kids who have either used the program or just are advocates for mental health, I hope that you'll have them either contact me, or we'll have the contact information on the fact sheet. We have about 5 kiddos who have stepped forward so far, and they don't have to have used iMatter, but it would be even really neat. We have a lot of media interest. So it would be great if somebody wants to talk to the press, if you have a kiddo like that in your midst. And I'll sort of wrap up there in case you guys have any questions. I'm sorry if I went over. Okay, good.
You are good on time. Let me get back. Perfect. Thank you, Laura. I think the iMatter program is very important, and I'm glad that you shared some numbers on how young people are actually using it and for multiple sessions. So thank you. We will send out some more resources and links out after this, I believe from Emily or from myself, we'll see, so that everyone has access to those resources as well. But now we can begin our Q&A portion of the webinar. If anyone has any additional questions, they can enter those into the chat. Looked like there were some questions about a Spanish option, which I believe Laura shared. There's a fully Spanish website, as well as Spanish posters and stickers as well.
There was a question in the Q&A part just around the incentives for the therapists in the iMatter program. So is each therapist paid, Laura, as much as a typical, therapist would be for each client student they see? How does that work?
That's a great question. One second, I'm going to put in the chat. Somebody asked how to order the print materials. So in the chat, you'll find a website. You can also order via the imatter.colorado. imattercolorado.org website. You can tell I haven't had enough coffee today. So providers, I will put the link in the chat, but right now the way we're doing this is our priority really is to those providers. We have always, everybody has to be licensed, but we're looking for more providers that can offer services in other languages, or who are in rural or frontier communities, or who can offer in-person sessions. But the providers are all credentialed and so forth by Signal, and then they are paid, I'm told, I don't have the precise rate, but they're paid usually at a rate commensurate with commercial rates, so not above Medicaid. And they are, they range in credentialing from LCSW, LPCs. We have some graduate students who are under supervision and so forth, but everybody's licensed to provide counseling. And I'm trying to think if there was any other part to that question. So I'll send an email that could probably, they're better to answer the questions specifically about that. But if you do know of therapists who have an expertise in working with a certain population, that's always really helpful for us, other languages.
Thank you.
Oh, and sorry, I was gonna say, we do pay for no shows.
There was one more question that came in through the Q&A, and Melissa, you answered it by typing, but I'd love to ask it and hear your response for the group from Melissa and Keith, just around nope, that's not the question. Just curious about the intersection of mental health and substance abuse and how that has changed with the pandemic, and how families are involved with this work when a student is enrolled in your school.
Sure. The co-occurrence rate between mental health and addiction among adolescents is very, very high, greater than 95%. And that's why many of these kids start using drugs, because they want to change the way they feel. They're anxious, they're depressed, they want to change the way they feel. Well, drugs really work really well to make you feel better. And so that's how a lot of them struggle with substance abuse. And so it's something to definitely watch out for. And I think we have found here at 5280 that if we try to provide all the mental health services that they need, well, guess what's going to be pushed out? Math, reading, writing, and science. And so we have to leverage community partnerships in order to meet our mission as a school, because we can do crisis management and we have frequent check-ins with kids throughout the day, but we can't do the deep down work that some of these kids require. So we provide services to the family. We provide resources to the family for that. And there's a big parent component. We have a whole crew of parents that when a new family comes in the door, parents are scared out of their minds. They don't know, do I take the kid's car? Do I not? Do I set a curfew? Do I not? They do not know what to do. They think their kids are just going to die or overdose if they make the wrong decision. And so they need help as a parent. And so we connect them with parent groups that we affiliate with. We also connect them with just parent phone numbers, call this parent. And that usually, more than anything that Keith or I would ever say, that's what the parent needs to hear. It's like our kids, if they hear from a peer, then they're more, it hits harder, because it's oh, this is somebody who's in my position. They were just in that position 6 months ago. So it's a big part of what we do. And yeah.
Yeah, and I would just say, we refer with iMatter as well. I have Spanish brochures right here, right? And we have posters all over the school, and it's all throughout our school. So we also use iMatter at our school as well, and we have their brochures and their posters. And our kids are very well aware of those resources, and that's important, is knowing where the resources are and leveraging those resources. So kids have a comfortable place to be able to go speak and have those conversations, maybe with somebody that they don't know. So now we definitely use those resources, and it's important. It's important, and that nobody falls through the cracks here, and we get an opportunity to get them the help that they need and deserve. So.
Thank you. We have just a few minutes left. Are there any other questions for either Melissa or Keith or Laura? Or does anyone want to type into the chat anything to share about what's going on in your school? our community. We will definitely be sharing out links, Holly. I see your question that you can share with your school. We did record this, so if anyone wants to share that wellness center tour with anyone at your school sites, feel free to do that, or the presentation on iMatter or the amazing things happening at 5280. We will definitely be sharing that. I see, could it be spoken to more about how 5280 started? A school
Yeah, I
like
can
this
take-
is so needed on the Western Slope.
Yeah, I'll
Thanks.
take that one. So Melissa kind of mentioned earlier that she was in recovery herself, and she had met a student who was going to East High School here in Denver, and he was struggling with heroin. And he had just celebrated 6 months of sobriety. And the last thing that he needed to do to complete his journey is to drop out of high school, because it's so many drugs in the community, so many drugs at high school, right? And it was a struggle to deal with the pressures of having drugs put right in your face. And she felt like that can't be right. A kid should not have to drop out of high school because it's so many drugs there. So she had this burning idea of starting a recovery high school. And she did that. And now our goal is we believe we can replicate our school in other communities. We want one maybe in the Colorado Springs area or on the Western Slope. And Melissa actually has a new school leader here now who will be taking over the day-to-day duties, and she will be going out as the executive director and looking at other communities to start 5280 High School. So if you are interested in having one in the Western Slope, definitely connect with her, reach out. She's going to start doing surveys and studies to figure out what it would take for us to build another 5280 in those communities. And we want to have one all over, because we're in the worst drug crisis that our country's ever seen, and it doesn't look to stop. So we have to be able to have resources and safe places for kids to be able to go to school, still get their high school diploma.
Yeah, Kendra, please reach out, because I've got some funding, some seed funding. And like Keith mentioned, we hired a new school leader. So I now have the capacity to start expanding, and I would love to come to the Western Slope and help with funding and organizing that. So please reach out.
So awesome to see some connections being made. That's the point of the Colorado Reengagement Network. So super excited to see that happening. We've got just another minute. Does anyone have any last questions? Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining in. It really is like encouraging to hear about resources and options for students, you know, programs like 5280, or like I said, I have a personal connection with the iMatter. And I just think all of it is just so, it's like I said, encouraging. And I was feeling kind of like, oh, it's so daunting. There's so much, but there are supports out there for students. And so I really appreciate you sharing them with all of us. And I appreciate everyone for joining. I hope y'all have a great afternoon.
Shout out to my girl Monique. Good looking out. I appreciate you. Thank you for having us. We're grateful. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Laura. Thanks. Maybe I'll close out and we could touch base on, I'd love to touch base on Teams, but since we're recording, it'd be kind of weird to do that, to send out. So awesome. I'm going to leave.